All right, we are taking a very special look at what is going to be happening in the budget, trying to analyze it, trying to get some sense of the key points, the main things that were done. It's being called an election budget from the point of view of, well, it's an interim budget, the election just around the corner. And obviously, a lot of what the government had to do and what Piyush Goyal did specifically in his speech today was to try and send a message which the BJP can also use in its election campaign. But at the same time, there was a broader message also that came about. There was a Vision 2030 that was articulated, which may well be a plan for India to go forward with. And perhaps, given what Rahul Gandhi had said earlier in the week as well, perhaps we're seeing a major change that is now coming up, in the sense that a change is coming in the way we are going to be handling the poorest of the poor. From the subsidy regime that has rolled for such a long time towards direct cash transfers, towards direct income being given to the poorest of the poor. Well, Chandan Mitra is here with us. I want to get a bunch of other guests who are going to be coming in and joining us also as we take a look at some of the main points that we have out there. Chandan, actually, why don't I just kick off with you? Your sense, we've had some time to now digest this. The big headline figures obviously were the middle class tax exemption, the tax relief out there, which may have an impact on the elections. But the Kisan Yojana, the concept of direct transfers. Now, I know there's been a lot of bickering. Should it have been 17 rupees? Should it have been more? Where was the money going to come from? Is it a step in the right direction? Let's just first agree on the step, and then we can figure out how it could have been tuned.
I would say it's too little, too late. That, it's a very small amount, and it has been being demanded for a long time. And there is no doubt that the direct benefit transfer is the best possible way of redistributing incomes and giving farmers a living wage. The government has carried out one part of the promise, that yes, now they will be directly giving the money, but the money amount is very little, and we have to wait and see how the distribution actually takes place. It is a little complicated.
Although it is an interim budget, so if they had actually come up with saying, actually the opposition can't have it both ways. In a sense, if the government had come out and said we're going to give 300,000 crore rupees to farmers, you'd have said it's an interim budget. You're not allowed to take steps that are that big. So maybe it's a direction, and we should figure out, because to really get it going to a larger amount of money, you will probably need to find ways of phasing out other subsidies and moving it.
Vikram, we have to also get the distribution mechanism right. Yeah. You see, till the rules are framed and the money actually gets into farmers' pockets, I don't think people will be very happy, because it is not an easy thing to achieve across this vast country.
Okay. Mr. Jakar, let me get the Congress party's sense on this. We heard Rahul Gandhi coming out and saying that it's not enough. It is an interim budget, of course, so there's only a directional path that I guess that can be laid out right now. And many people would say that we've already broken with convention. The number of policies, the number of announcements made is very different to the normal vote on account that you have in a budget.
So I'm not representing the Congress party. Let's put that on record first.
Just saying that as a general to get other sense of what people are saying.
But I think this announcement of direct payment to farmers is absolutely in the right direction. But it must be clearly noted that the term farmers does not mean all those involved in agriculture. It does not include tenant farmers. It does not include agriculture labor. And it only includes those who own land up to 5 acres. So that must be clearly understood. It does not impact every farmer's livelihood. Now, when I said it is progressive, when you look at Raita Bandhu, it is more progressive than that, because everyone up to 5 acres gets the same transfer of 6,000 rupees, unlike Raita Bandhu, where you actually get more money if you own more land. So I think it's a progressive move in that sense. But at the same time, when I said that on Twitter, that it's a progressive tax, I got people calling me and telling me it amounts to 3 rupees and 28 paisa per day per family member if there are 5 members in a family. So yes, the amount is less, but definitely it's in the right direction. And that's how you see even the Congress is also has contemplated before this on the same line. So I think this is how the nation's policy is now moving to give direct benefit to the people. I think so there's a unanimity amongst all political parties that we have to directly reach out.
And that might well be one of the reason why this week is going to be, this entire period is going to be considered a turning point. Remember, it was mentioned in the economic survey almost 2 years ago.
But there is a difference between what was mentioned in the economic survey, what Mr. Arvind Subramaniam has said in his article a few days ago. What he says in his economic survey, and what he says is that we will do away with all other subsidies and do an actual cash transfer, while what this does, while what Mr. Modi does, or while what Mr. Rahul Gandhi says is not that. It says they're not replacing existing subsidies or support systems. This is in addition to what is being given. So there's a big difference between farm input subsidies. There's a big difference between food subsidies. There's a big difference between livelihood support system. This is what I would call a livelihood support system. So there is a difference.
Desh, let me just get you in, and then I'm going to turn to the other thing, which is the middle class tax exemptions.
See, these direct benefit transfers was long due. In fact, if you look at the planning of the government, they got Jan Dhan account opened right in the first year itself. So they created that base for direct benefit transfer. So this is in tune with that. You know, you can debate it should be 6,000, 10,000, 11,000. But I think today, even on your channel, Congress agreed it's on the right direction. And also, if you look at the entire concept, this is being given in 3 installments. It appears that this would be, you know, in tune with the agricultural process, pre-sowing, during sowing, and post-harvest. You know, this is probably in that kind of 3 installment has been created. I have not seen the fine prints, but it is in that direction.
Well, let me just welcome a very special guest onto the show, Amitabh Kant, who's of course been driving lots of the policies of the government at Niti Aayog and elsewhere. Amitabh, we were just having a discussion out here on whether we are seeing one of those turning points in Indian polity where, yes, this may be one step, but in a sense, the Congress party has said that we also think this is a good idea. Are we going to remember January, February 2019 as the start of a process where we start dismantling the entire subsidy regime of the past and we start moving more to direct cash transfers to various people who need cash transfers? And the Kisan Yojana is one step in that direction. Presumably, if the opposition comes back to power, they'd also want to proceed on the same track.
So Vikram, I think this is the most notable feature of this budget. It marks a very major structural reform of moving away from farm loan waivers, which were distorting credit history, which were distorting markets, towards direct benefit transfer to farmers. You know, and this would enable liquidity to be provided to the farmers. More than that, I think when you add it up with the measures taken in both the dairy and the fisheries sector, because allied activities in agriculture are very critical, this should ensure that farmers' income are able to rise very substantially in the days to come. But more important than that is that the central government has done its bit. Agriculture is essentially a state subject, and state governments must play a very critical role now in building markets, in providing cold storages, backward-forward linkages, and ensuring that farmers are able to get a good return for their produce. This is critical because, you know, the Essential Commodities Act and, you know, the price controls on many of these areas are very, very retarding to the agriculture sectors and to the actual producers in the agriculture sector. So technology, markets, seed, fertilizer are very critical, and cold storages and the backward linkages.
So, Mr. Kant, implicit in that, is there also a slight admission, and perhaps this is an admission that all of us should take as a nation, that in some way or the other we have failed the farmers. The fact that there is farmers' distress, the fact that the terms of trade have moved against farmers, the fact that, you know, at times exports are permitted, at times exports are not permitted, the fact that they can't repay their loans, the fact that there is an agrarian crisis, some way or the other the farmers have been failed, and to that extent the government of the day has to take the responsibility for that as well.
Well, the government has done enormously. I mean, in terms of ENAM, in terms of soil health cards, in terms of the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, a lot has been done. In some states, we've had excessive degree of production. The critical thing, as I said about agriculture, is that markets must perform. And more than that, in a situation of agrarian distress like this, the good thing is that instead of indulging in populism, the government thought through and ensured that we are able to provide direct benefit transfer straight into the bank account of farmers. One issue that has been raised is about tenant farmers. And I would like to say that there are about close to 14.21% tenant farmers. If you look at their record, almost about 12% of the tenant farmers are those who, 12.5% are those who actually own land as well. So even tenant farmers will get, almost 85% of the tenant farmers will also get covered under the scheme.
So if I can look, there's a lot of vision 2030 that we did here in the budget, and that was an interesting part of the whole thing. But if you had to look at the vision 4 years, 5 years, 7 years later, whichever government is in power, would you think that one of the visions that we should move towards will be a situation that as and when distortions are to be fixed, whether it's to farmers, whether it's to the unemployed, whether it's to the rural poor or the urban poor, increasingly we will not have a system where we're having fertilizer subsidy or electricity subsidy or even food subsidy. It will all be, because we do have Aadhaar now, we do have bank accounts, it will all be done through direct payments, and by therefore perhaps ensuring more and more money actually goes through the pipe and reaches the intended recipient.
Yeah, so Vikram, one great credit you have to give to this government is that it has accelerated the process of Jam Trinity, that every single individual in India has a mobile, he has a bank account, and he has his biometric, and therefore India is actually the only country in the world with the infrastructure where you can provide subsidy straight through direct benefit transfer. You need to provide income straight into the bank account rather than providing subsidies of agriculture, fertilizer subsidies and so on. So the days of subsidy must end, and we must move increasingly towards income benefits.
I think you're right that technology potentially is a big help in that. But one of the questions, one of the words that we didn't hear much about.
This would, Vikram, the key thing in that is that this will ensure the end of all leakages in the Indian economy, and will make India a very efficient economy and ensure that the beneficiaries get amounts straight into their bank account.
Okay, now one of the words that we didn't hear at all in the budget was the J word, jobs, or U word, unemployment. And the fact that nothing specifically was said about that, and we've had this entire row over the last couple of days about the data not being released, whether it was provision or not. Is there a certain denial about possible joblessness or unemployment?
Vikram, the story of jobs is actually written all over the budget. From the first to the last para, starting from farmers, to the unorganized sector, to the MSME sector, to just about the whole story of not only jobs as they exist now, but looking at the jobs of the future. Because the budget talks about artificial intelligence, it talks about electric batteries, energy storage, it talks about renewable energy, it talks about digitization in all our villages, and therefore it looks at providing jobs across sectors, but it also looks at jobs for the future. So, the government clearly recognizes that growth has to be, the important thing is that India must grow at rapid rates. Without growth, you can't have distributive equity. With growth, you can have distributive equity. And then you need to provide jobs for that. And therefore, the story of jobs is all over this budget.
All right, fine. One last question. I did speak to the finance secretary earlier in the day, and he said that, where the resources going to be coming from. It's it obviously is not going to suffice some of the schemes that have done to solve all the income problems of the farmers, but where will the resources come from? He essentially seemed to indicate that buoyancy is really what is being bet upon that, as the economy grows, there will be tax buoyancy. Is that a fair assumption, you think? Or could there be a slippage, which would therefore mean whenever the full budget comes out in July, suddenly there are a whole bunch of fresh taxes?
No, Vikram, the good thing is that the government has been very financially disciplined, I must say. It has had a fiscal deficit of just about 3.4%, which to my mind is fine. But the way direct taxes have grown, the buoyancy, almost doubling, the tax base rising by almost 80%. And my view is that in the days to come, you'll see a huge buoyancy in GST as well. As it settles down, you'll see a huge growth because your tax base in GST is also grown in numbers term. So you'll have a huge tax buoyancy, but I envisage that our ambition and our hunger in India must be to grow at higher rates of 9 to 10%. There's no reason why India shouldn't be growing at 9 to 10%. And with 9 to 10% growth, you should have much higher tax buoyancy.
All right, Amitabh Kant, thank you so much for speaking and sharing some light on that. And yes, that vision part is something that is really important. Yeah, you were not looking completely convinced about everything that Amitabh was saying.
No, I think this is the pressure of his job. He has to present a rosy picture. But I'm afraid it's not so hunky-dory and rosy as my friend Mr. Kant has put it. You see, for job growth, which he has rightly emphasized, that India's growth has to be higher and there ought to be tax buoyancy. But everything is a two-way system. Now, even today, farmers are agitating all over. Even in Delhi, they've blockaded the DND bridge because they want some major sops. And Ganna Kisan, the farmers, sugarcane farmers, are very badly off because every year they never get the
So that's very clearly a failure, but that's not a failure that can be entirely tackled by just by sops or by that alone. I really think, and that's probably this is not the time to have that discussion. We need to have a complete rethink on the way we are handling Indian agriculture. And that's something that Ajay, for example, has been talking about at great
How
length.
do they get a fair price?
Yeah.
And on time?
Okay, can I just shift focus a little bit and just look at one of the other major things that we should talk about, which of course the exemption that came out. And by the way, important clarification, to just understand, is this kicking in right now? Is it going to kick in later? I did speak to the CBDT chief a little earlier in the day, and this is what he had to say about the specific nature of the phasing of these exemptions. What do they really mean? Who benefits and who doesn't? This is what the CBDT chief said. There's been some questions after that as to when exactly it kicks in and what the specific meaning of this is. So this is not kicking in right now. It will only come after the budget in July?
No. This is the budget proposal which will be passed in this parliament itself. So this will kick from the from the 1st of April 2019 only. Because this is the rates which we are giving for the next financial years. So that should be made very, very clear that from 1st of April 2019, these rates will come into the picture. These concessions which we have given will come into the picture.
Okay, let me just try and get a further understanding of that, because there's obviously a lot of confusion around this. I'm seeing any number of reports which are saying that for this increasing, like the fact that nobody will have to pay income tax.
Up to 5 lakh.
Up to 5 lakh rupees.
Yes.
That is, you're saying, is going to kick in from the 1st of April.
Yeah, definitely.
It's part of this budget.
This budget, yes. That's why I'm telling you. This is the part of this budget that up to the return income or the taxable income up to 5 lakh rupees, no tax liability will arise on the persons. We will give the rebate of the amount of the tax which is up to the 5 lakh rupees of a return income or the taxable income. So even if a person who is investing more than something around 1.5 lakh rupees in the specified savings, then up to 6.5 lakh rupees he will have not to pay any tax. If he pays something more than 50,000 rupees in NPS, up to 7 lakh rupees also, because the net return income will be 5 lakhs, so no tax will be payable. If he gets a standard deduction also, being a salaried employee, he will get a standard deduction of 50,000 also. So up to 7 lakh, 7.5 lakh, depending upon the investment which he makes, and the return income comes to 5 lakh rupees, so no tax liability onto that particular person, because that will give benefit to 3 crore of persons at all, and 18,050 or 500 crore is the money which will be available in their hands because of the tax savings.
All right, Ajay and Chandan, before I come to Desh, so that's the clarification. It's all kicking in right now. But another couple of interesting clarifications, I think, which have come from the government, which is worth noting, just in case you didn't know about this, you should. If you're actually getting more than 5 lakh rupees as income, if you're getting 8 lakhs or 9 lakhs, it's not that your tax exemption is going to kick in or you're not going to get the benefit of that gap from 2.5 to 5. That is only given to the person. If you're slightly better off, you don't get any benefits from that. So that's one important clarification. Do you think the middle classes will be happy? They've been somewhat unhappy or miserable in the last few in the last few years. I mean, actually, the middle classes are often unhappy with what happens. They tend to pay a lot of the taxes. Would this have done enough to satisfy them?
I think so. The question, you could reframe the question and say that are 4 years of unhappiness going to be wiped out with this good budget? And that's the question you should be asking.
So you're saying it is a good budget?
I think it's a budget in the right direction because it gives sops to everyone. I don't know where the money is going to come from because I think so.
They said tax buoyancy. That's where the money is going to come from. You just heard
tax buoyancy means that they don't know where it's coming from. It just means that we hope it will come. There's also a shortfall of 1 lakh crore rupees on GST on account of GST. I don't know what's going to happen with the next government which comes in. I don't know how they're going to balance the acts. But yes, there's good announcements for all sections of society. But is it good enough for them to forget what they've gone through? Farmers will not forget it so easily.
They take his point forward. Sometimes, when a budget is full of just good news and there's no real bad news anywhere, then the bad news sometimes is that there will be a bill that will have to be paid later. Now, of course, the best part about putting forward a budget, which is an interim budget, is in case that happens and that buoyancy is not there, it's somebody else in July. Well, the government will probably hope it is still them who's going to have to deal with it, but they have to deal with it after the election. Or an opposition will have to deal with it.
See, the fact remains, every budget is based on projections on tax collections. This is not the first budget. The projection is always made. And earlier there was uncertainty. Here there is a graph. If you look at the 4 years, it's on the upswing after GST. So there is a clear projection. You only have to extrapolate it slightly. So the tax compliance is increasing. Tax collection has also increased. The base is also increasing. So those are very reasonable projections. And every budget is based on projections.
Okay. Chandan, is that fair enough? So we have heard two things. Not enough was done. And then at the same time, where is the money going to come from is the second part of it. So if they are saying that, look, we've allowed the fiscal deficit to go from 3.1 to 3.4, the money will come and it will come from tax buoyancy. Is that fair enough?
You see, that is not my concern, because this is for economists to work out whether this whether money will come from and whether it will actually come or not. I think the bigger concern is what you were talking about at the outset, that the whole aim of empowering the farmer to ensure that the farmer gets a good price for his produce, and that's the root cause of farmer unrest today, that they believe they are not getting a good price, and this is going on for years. No proper mechanism to ensure that farm unrest does not happen and production goes up, and along with that economy is much more buoyant than it is today, so that tax collections go up, so that government earnings go up, and government has the money to spend on all these social welfare schemes that they have launched. I think that has to be the objective, and I don't see sufficient movement in that direction.
Okay.
I think this because the government and all the economists and everyone talks about GDP growth. Now, GDP growth in India specifically is now based on consumption, and consumption is based on increasing private debt, government debt, central government debt and state government debt. For how long can you do it? So if you're looking at this tax collection based on consumption, which is based on such huge debt that cannot be repaid, we are only transferring cost to the next generation. I think the whole matrix of looking at, and GDP is a measure of productivity, but generally all academicians, all economists, the government makes it synonymous with well-being and welfare. And that's where the whole policy framework is wrong, and we need to rework this whole debt-based economy. It's not going to last long. It's like we're just transferring it by 5 to 10 years. I don't know what's going to happen afterwards.
All right. Well, I'm going to slip into a break right now. There's lots, obviously, that this budget is given for us to think about in a certain direction. Srinivasan Jain on the other side of this is going to take it forward. I'll be back a short while later with a special interview with the Finance Minister. That's coming up.